David sends to Zadok and to Abiathar the priest, saying, "Speak unto the elders of Judah," these were the leaders in Jerusalem, "why are ye the last to bring the king back to his house, seeing the speech of all Israel has come to the king, even to his house?" So I'm conjecturing, I'm thinking that all the people are all those who followed Absalom. They had fled and scattered when Absalom was killed. But then they started thinking, okay, the one, and I thought it was interesting in verse 10, it says, "Absalom whom we anointed." God anointed David, and God anointed Saul. God did not anoint Absalom. The people did. So the king that they set over themselves is dead. And so it was in their heart to go back and say, "David, we need you," because he had done so much for them. He had victory after victory after victory over their enemies, and so the people were ready to have David back. But David can't just march back into Jerusalem and proclaim himself king. Judah and Israel had rejected him when they anointed Absalom as king. He had the military power right at this point to return to Jerusalem, but power is different from recognized authority. And if he went back in and forced the people to acknowledge him as king, he wouldn't be able to enjoy the authority, and he wouldn't be able to do what he wanted as king, because he didn't know if he would have all of their support. So for David to regain his authority as king, Judah and Israel needed to reaffirm him as their monarch. So I always did wonder about that, but it's pretty clear David couldn't just go back in. And plus, if at all possible, David wanted to avoid more bloodshed. There had already been quite a bit on the people of Israel's side. So what this verse is saying, the people are talking about it. They're wanting to bring David back. They're ready, but there was not a formal recall. But I think the leaders of Judah were a little bit, they were just taking their time. They were lax in doing this. And logically, because they were the leaders of Jerusalem, where David reigned, it should begin with it was his own tribe of Judah. So to help this process along, David does two things. And one, he appeals to their pride. He says in verse 11, "Why are you the last to bring the king back to his house?" Verse 12, "You are my brethren, you're my bones and my flesh. Why are you the last to bring me back?" And so, for one, though, this does show how effective Absalom had been in getting support from Jerusalem and from the other tribes of Israel. He almost did it. he almost brought it to pass. But then, so the first thing, David appeals to his tribe and to their pride in being the ones who should invite him back. And then in verse 13, "And say ye to Amasa," and remember, Amasa was the one that Absalom got to lead his troops. He was Absalom's captain. David says to him, "Art thou not of my bone and of my flesh?" He was a nephew, I think. Anyway, "God do so to me, and more also, if thou be not captain of the host before me continually in the room of Joab." In other words, instead of Joab, Amasa, I want you to be the captain. And that was a political strategy. Amasa had been leader over all the insurgents. So if he could get Amasa to join him, Amasa could bring the others to David's side easier. Now, that's trusting that Amasa wouldn't turn on him, because he had been a part of the group that was going to go kill him. So he had to be careful about that too. But also, I think we can all understand why David did not want Joab to stay in that position as captain of his army. So Verse 14, and he, David, bowed the heart of all the men of Judah, even as the heart of one man, so that they sent this word to the king. So here's the priests went and talked to the leaders of Jerusalem, leaders of Judah, and then their answer was, return thou and all thy servants. So now he has a formal welcome. So the king returned and came to Jordan. And Judah came to Gilgal, the tribe of Judah. Gilgal means a wheel or rolling thing, and I'll tell you why in a second. They came to Gilgal to meet the king, to conduct the king over the Jordan. So it was like a ceremony here. It was pomp and circumstance, you know. David came to the Jordan. He crossed by a ferry, and Judah was there to welcome him. And just to show you, here it is. And I meant to copy these and forgot for you. But it shows it a little bit, and I'll pass it around. So here's Mahanaim. It has a question mark because some of these places they're not absolutely sure. They just kind of know the vicinity. So right here's the Dead Sea. Over here's Jerusalem. So up here is Mahanaim. That's where David had holed up during the rebellion. And the forest of Ephraim is right around here. So they had the battle there. Then David's, that's where he sat in the gate and talked with his army. So now he went back down here. Jericho's right here. And Gilgal is right near Jericho. It's more towards the east. This is the Jordan River. So David is on this side. He goes across to Gilgal. Now, so it doesn't say where Gilgal is, but look on the map, you can see where Jericho is, and it's just a little closer to the river from Jericho. So Gilgal, I'm going to read in Joshua 4:19 and let you know just a tiny bit of history of Gilgal. And the people came up out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month and encamped in Gilgal in the east border of Jericho. Now this is back in Joshua. Remember, now this is the very beginning when they're going into the land. And they come from the east. They're just crossing the Jordan. How did they cross the Jordan? Does anyone remember?
The priest had to take the ark into put their feet
Right.
in it, and then the Lord told them.
Yes, it was a miracle, comparable to the Red Sea crossing. So it was, they got there at, I think it was springtime. Anyway, it was when the Jordan was full, and not like our rivers around here. They're not hard to cross, but that was a full river, and so it's a neat story how God had the priests that were carrying the ark had to actually step into the water by faith, and the minute their feet hit the waters went back. And it's interesting in that, I should have told you before I passed it around, up north from where they were crossing at Gilgal was a little town called Adam. Adam. Mm-hmm. And the Bible says it began at Adam, the parting of the waters, and it went down to where they were, and which is a neat picture of how Jesus made us. Made salvation available to us. We didn't have to drown in the river, and it went all the way, took care of the sin all the way back to Adam. I just think that's a cool thing, and that's not original with me. I heard that a long time ago, and I've always thought that's such a neat picture. So anyway, so Gilgal was right after they got up out of the Jordan. They went to Gilgal. And those 12 stones which they took out of the Jordan did Joshua pitch in Gilgal. So Gilgal had 12 stones, and I'll bet they were still there at David's time. And he spake to the children of Israel, saying, when your children shall ask their fathers in time to come, saying, what do these stones mean? Then you shall let your children know, saying, Israel came over this Jordan on dry land. Remember, it was dry, just like the Red Sea had been dry. Otherwise, it would have been too muddy to cross. And we all know that it takes a while to dry, not immediately. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan from before you until you were passed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up from before us until we were gone over, that all the people of the earth might know the hand of the Lord, that it is mighty, that ye might fear the Lord your God forever. And it is true, because they crossed the Jordan in this way, news travels fast by word of mouth. And so the people of the land realized, Jericho was the one of the first to realize, oh my goodness, these guys are powerful. Their gods made the sea, made the sea divide so they could cross over, and it scared them. And that was part of the strategy that God used to give them the land of Canaan, cause them to be victorious. And in Joshua 5:7, and their children whom he raised up in their stead. So the first generation that came from Egypt died off in that 40 years because they did not believe God, they disobeyed him, and it was their children then that are crossing the Jordan and getting ready to fight to go into the land of Canaan. And the Lord said to Joshua in verse 9 of Joshua 5, this day have I rolled away the reproach of Egypt from off of you. Egypt is a picture of sin, the world. And the children of Israel were delivered from that sin by Jesus, by Joshua. And God rolled off the humiliation of slavery, all the sin, he rolled it off of them. Wherefore the name of the place is called Gilgal unto this day. Gilgal means a rolling off, a wheel. A rolling thing, sorry. No. Yeah. It's a wheel. So anyway, this is the same exact place now that David, who is also a type of Christ, crosses the Jordan, and he stops in Gilgal, and that is where the tribe of Judah, the leaders of Judah, and there are some Israelites with them, they all meet David and formally ask him to be their king again. So it's the beginning of another covenant. God kept his promise to the children of Israel that they would be given the land of Canaan, and their conquest began at Gilgal. Here God rolled off the shame of their slavery in Egypt. Here also God kept his promise to David by bringing him safely back to regain his throne. And in 2 Samuel chapter 7, remember when God said to David, thine house and thy kingdom shall be established forever before thee. Thy throne shall be established forever. I think David wondered if maybe God would keep that promise through Absalom, but it was not God's will to do that. He was going to keep his promise to David, and it was reiterated, regained here at Gilgal. So I just thought that was neat. Okay, now in verse 16, back in our chapter 19.
Second Samuel.
Okay, so, and Shimei, the son of Gera, a Benjamite, which was of Bahurim, hasted. Now remember, this was the man who cursed David, who threw stones and dust on him when he was leaving Jerusalem barefoot and weeping with his head covered because of the insurrection of his son. This man just railed at him, which was crazy because David was surrounded by his mighty men. If it had been any other king, they would have had him killed. So, but he hasted and came down with the men of Judah to meet King David. He had taken the wrong side. And so now he's got to make amends, because otherwise he knows that his life is it's at stake. And there were 1,000 men of Benjamin with him. So he stopped to get 1,000 men of Benjamin to come with him. And remember, Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin. So he's trying to let David know that he supports him, that he's on David's side. And Ziba, the servant of the house of Saul, and his 15 sons and his 20 servants with him. And they went over the Jordan before the king. So these two men and their supporters come and are with David at this point. And verse 18, there went over a ferry boat to carry over the king's household and to do what he thought good. And Shimei the son of Gera fell down before the king as he was come over the Jordan, and said to the king, Let not my lord impute iniquity unto me, neither do thou remember that which thy servant did perversely the day that my lord the king went out of Jerusalem, that the king should take it to his heart. For thy servant doth know that I have sinned. Therefore, behold, I am come the first this day of all the house of Joseph to go down and meet my lord the king. But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, answered and said, Shall not Shimei be put to death for this, because he cursed the Lord's anointed? He reminds me of Peter. He just does. But he's saying to David, let's get him. Now is the time we can get him. And so, verse 22, and David said, What have I to do with you, ye sons of Zeruiah, that you should this day be adversaries to me? Shall there any man be put to death this day in Israel? For do not I know that I am this day king over Israel? I like it that he says I am. That reminds me of somebody. Therefore the king said to Shimei, Thou shalt not die. Now, if anything shows David's heart, this does too. Because Shimei had not just said a few mean things, he had been obnoxious and worthy of death. But David said, Thou shalt not die. And the king sware unto him. He swore that he would not die. Hi, Mona. So, one thing, there are several reasons David did this, and some of them political, I believe. But he did do it out of mercy, first of all. But then also, he wanted to set the stage. He didn't want any killing on this day. This was a joyous day. This was the day that he was coming back to regain his throne. And so,
You remember, little different circumstances, but Saul did the same thing. Remember when God made Saul king there at that time, when they had to find him in luggage, and there were some men there
yeah,
that did
they
not
wanted to kill
with
him.
him, yes, and so they wanted to, and Saul said, no, not today.
Right. That's a good thought. Although it's too bad Saul's heart changed a little
Well,
bit
this
after
is
that.
true, I just think maybe it was God's order of things,
Right.
perhaps.
Maybe not to have killing on
Yes,
this time.
uh-huh.
At this time, yeah. So David was sending a message to everyone that had been a part of the insurrection that there will be mercy. Because if he would forgive Shimei, surely he would forgive others that hadn't sinned in the same way or been as cruel in their opposition to David as Shimei had been. David needed acceptance back as king in order to rule. If you're trying to be king over people that do not want you as their king, it doesn't work. So then also it reminded me of in Luke 9:53, Jesus and his disciples were on their way back to Jerusalem, and I think it was Samaria. I can't remember now because I didn't put that verse down. But he was going through a town in Samaria, I believe. And in Luke 9:53, it says, And they did not receive him, because his face was as though he would go to Jerusalem. The Samaritans didn't like the Jews, and Jerusalem was the Jewish capital, and the Samaritans did not. The reason they didn't receive this prophet, whoever he was, they didn't know probably, Jesus and his disciples. The reason they didn't receive him because he was on his way to Jerusalem. But when his disciples, James and John, saw this, now remember, they're called the sons of thunder. They said, Lord, wilt thou that we command fire to come down from heaven and consume them, even as Elijah did? But he turned and rebuked them and said, You know not what manner of spirit ye are of. For the Son of Man is not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. And they went to another village. So it was kind of the same thing. They weren't receiving Jesus. They were spurning him. But the answer was not to send fire down from heaven and consume them. And he says, You don't know what spirit you are of. And it made me realize that Abishai, I don't think he was nearly as bad as his brother Joab. But it's the spirit that wasn't like David. And David's spirit was different than that. So back to 2 Samuel 19, verse 24. And Mephibosheth. So in the narrative, David is on his way to Jerusalem. He's being welcomed at Gilgal, but there's people that meet him on the way, ones that we've heard about before. Mephibosheth, the son of Saul, came down to meet the king and had neither dressed his feet nor trimmed his beard nor washed his clothes from the day the king departed until, I can't read that. How long?
Until the day he came again.
Okay, good. Thank you. Until the day came. Mine's all messed up right there. He came again in peace. So this is what the Israelites, it was their tradition to do when they were mourning. They would not trim their beard, the men, and not wash their clothes. They took care about their feet because they walked with either bare feet or sandals all the time. And so I read that they cared for their feet more than we do. But this was a sign of mourning for Mephibosheth. And just like the difference between, was it God's will for Joab to kill Absalom or not? Was it God's will for David to listen to Joab's advice? There's commentaries on both sides of the fence here also concerning Mephibosheth. Was he real? Was this sincere? Or was he just trying to be like Shimei and make sure that he was on David's good side? There's both sides of that coin that you read. That some believe that Mephibosheth was sincere and good, and it was Ziba, his servant, that messed up, that slandered him, as he said. And some believe that it wasn't that way, that Mephibosheth may have thought that perhaps he would be king. I don't know. I think Mephibosheth was sincere, because I don't trust Ziba. And Ziba had, as far as I can tell, he had those lands of Saul before David what's the word I need? He gave the land that Ziba was taking care of for himself. He said, okay, now you are the servant, I want you to take care of him for Mephibosheth. I could be wrong about that land, but I thought that I got the impression that Ziba was taking care of it. And so to have to take care of it for somebody else might not have gone over real well in his mind. And so, but remember, Ziba had told David, he at least chose David's side. He didn't choose Absalom, so he was smart about that. But he told David, oh, my master Mephibosheth, he just thought he could be king, and so he didn't come. Well, no.
He was Jonathan's son, right?
He was what?
Mephibosheth. That was Jonathan's son.
Yes, Jonathan's son.
I think he knew from Jonathan what kind of man David was, and he wanted to serve him.
That's true.
Sincerity,
Yes.
That had influence, I think.
I think it might have too.
Conjecture, but
it's interesting that calls him son of Saul. And I know that's a general, they do that. He was actually the son of Jonathan. And I think some of what you're saying has merit.
But too, I wonder about the fact that he was crippled.
Oh, right,
Would
that
they have
played a
made
part.
him king anyway?
I don't know. But I don't think Absalom would have. Absalom definitely would not have made him king. So I don't know where that, that doesn't make sense to me. But, the fact that he had not dressed his feet or trimmed his beard, I tried to find out about how long all this took. How long was David gone? I'm guessing it's got to have been at least a month or two. But nobody knew, and nobody would say. So I couldn't find that information. But if someone hasn't trimmed his beard in that long of a time,
how long?
A couple of months maybe, or at least a month, a man's beard is going to grow. You can cut it, but you can't make it longer. So in other words, if he's telling him, I didn't trim my beard the entire time you were gone, and yet he has a short beard, well, then he's lying. But this makes me think that he was, now he could pretend all the other things, but he can't really fix his beard to be long. So, and I just think also Mephibosheth was a type of us receiving grace from God. because it was really great, the information that you gave us, Marianne. So he was definitely a type of us receiving grace from Jesus, and he received grace from David. So I think it might be that the type would go on. That's not by itself, that doesn't necessarily mean we can believe him, but I kind of think he was true, was sincere. So in verse 25, and it came to pass when he was come to Jerusalem to meet the king, that the king said to him, Wherefore wentest thou not with me, Mephibosheth? I can imagine David being, David experienced an enormous amount of rejection. The elders of Judah, all the leaders in Jerusalem, his own son. His son had garnered the majority of Israel against David. And I just, at this point, I just think David had a lot to overcome. And that's his question, why didn't you go with me? And he answered, My lord, O king, my servant deceived me. For thy servant said, I will saddle me an ass that I may ride thereon and go to the king, because thy servant is lame. And he hath slandered thy servant unto my lord the king. But my lord the king is as an angel of God. Do therefore what is good in thine eyes. For all of my father's house were but dead men before my lord the king. Yet didst thou set thy servant among them that did eat at thy own table. What right, therefore, have I yet to cry any more to the king? So evidently what happened is he was ready to go and be with David, and had Ziba, his servant, saddle up his donkey, get it ready, and Ziba just took them all and left. That seems to be what happened. And so Ziba might have done it. It saw an opportunity to slander Mephibosheth so that he could have the land. If people's hearts are not after God, they're going to be after themselves. And greed is something that motivates most people. So the king said to him, Why speakest thou any more of these matters? I have said, Thou and Ziba divide the land. And it's conjectured here that perhaps David, number one, he didn't want to alienate Ziba at this point because he needed all the support he could get. But and also he probably just wasn't sure at this point who to believe. But then in verse 30, and this is another reason I kind of tend to go with Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth said to the king, Yea, let him take all. I don't care about the land. For as much as my lord the king is come again in peace unto his own house. And so, regardless of exactly, we're not told, we're just simply not told exactly what was in Mephibosheth's heart. But to continue the type of it being just like us and God having grace on us, Mephibosheth was willing, the land didn't mean anything to him. His king had come back and he was willing to give it all up. He was concerned about David and David alone. And I like that. I like that part. Because that's how we need to be. There's nothing as important as our king. When he comes back, we care about him.
You bet.
So we want, as the bride, we want to be ready to meet him and not have anything interfere.
There's his humility and the humility that we must have as well.
Yes, yes. So, verse 31, and Barzillai, the Gileadite, came down from, I hate these places, Roglim, and went over the Jordan with the king to conduct him over the Jordan. Now, this guy, I like him.
Yeah.
Now, Barzillai was a very aged man, even 80 years old. Very aged.
We're aged, Nellie.
And he had
I'm
provided.
way past it.
They're even more aged. He had provided the king of sustenance while he lay at Mahanaim, where he was a very great man. So this man, Barzillai, was from Mahanaim, he was wealthy enough. I don't know how many were in David's support group. There had to be hundreds at least, and maybe 1,000 or more that had come from Jerusalem. They had no um, supplies because they had had to leave quickly. And this Barzillai supported them all while they were there. So he gave. It was first just wonderful how God met David's needs, physical needs. God knows that we have need of sustenance, and he provided it. And this man was happy to provide this for his king. And so the king said, verse 33, unto Barzillai, come thou over with me, over the Jordan, is what it means, and I will feed thee with me in Jerusalem. What he's saying is, I want to take care of you because you took care of us. So can I take care of you the rest of your life? Can you come sit at my table, is what he was saying. Same sort of thing he said to Mephibosheth. I am, and then he said, verse 34, and Barzillai said to the king, how long have I to live that I should go up with the king unto Jerusalem? I am this day 80 years old. How can I discern between good and evil? Can thy servant taste what I eat or what I drink? Can I hear any more the voice of singing men and singing women? He's just kind of describing old age here. Wherefore then should thy servant be yet a burden to my lord the king? He's just saying it's not feasible for me to do you any good, David. And so he says, thy servant will go a little way over Jordan with the king, and why should the king recompense it me with such a reward? Let thy servant, I pray thee, turn back again that I may die in my own city, and be buried by the grave of my father and my mother. But behold thy servant Chimham, and some translations are Kimham, I don't know. He is a conjecture to be perhaps the son of Barzillai. Let him go over with my lord the king, and do to him what shall seem good unto thee. And the king answered, Chimham shall go over with me, and I will do to him that which shall seem good unto thee. He's saying, whatever you would like me to do for him, I will do. And whatsoever thou shalt require of me, that will I do for thee. So David is rewarding those who were with him. Just like our king is going to come one of these days, and he will bring a reward for those who have supported him and loved him and been with him, not forsaken him. In verse 39, all the people went over Jordan. And when the king was come over, the king kissed Barzillai and blessed him, and he returned to his own place. Then the king went on to Gilgal, and Chimham went with him. All the people of Judah conducted the king, and also half the people of Israel. Notice that, half the people of Israel, not quite all of them. Now verse 41.
Now, let me ask you a question there. I've never thought about it this way. When it says half the people of Israel, in order for them all to come, does that mean all of the families of all of the men? Or does it just mean all the leaders of the people of it? I don't know what that means exactly.
I don't know either, because it's not clear and nobody really knows. I'm guessing it's the leaders.
Okay.
I could be wrong. But yeah, some of those, the narrator doesn't do a good job of giving us detail. So, verse 41, all the men of Israel came to the king and said to the king, now we've got all the men of Israel coming to David and saying, why have our brethren, the men of Judah, stolen thee away and have brought the king and his household and all David's men with him over the Jordan? In other words, they wanted to take part in the re-welcoming or regaining David's throne. It was ceremonial, and they wanted to take part in it. And they said, why did you just do this without us even knowing? We didn't get to come and help bring our king back. And verse 42, All the men of Judah answered the men of Israel, because the king is near kin to us. Wherefore then be ye angry for this matter? Have we eaten at all the king's cost, or hath he given us any gift? In other words, are we getting something for doing this? No. And the men of Israel answered the men of Judah and said, we have 10 parts in the king. Okay, so it was I think the tribe of Benjamin and Judah, and then the rest of the tribes of Israel were the 10. We have 10 parts in the king, and we have also more right in David than ye. Why then did ye despise us, that our advice should not be first had in bringing back our king? And in some translations, it makes it a little clearer. They said, we were the first ones that wanted to bring back the king, and that was true. And the words of the men of Judah were fiercer than the words of the men of Israel. So there was a problem here. And, you know, the sad thing here is we see a little bit of a precursor to what's going to happen in Israel later, just with David's, was it grandson, Rehoboam? It's almost like here we're seeing the beginnings of division. And it's interesting because remember, David had asked the leaders of Judah, why were they last to have him brought back? And he asked them that way because he was trying to motivate them to bring him back and to not hesitate, you know, and not, because the people of Israel had already let him know that they wanted him back. And so he's saying, well, why are you, he was playing on that. And I'm not saying it was a wrong thing to do, but it did help the division in this case for him to do it that way. So anyway, we have the benefit of knowing what's coming next. They didn't. Okay, now I am going to go ahead. We've got some time. I'm going into the next chapter because it's short and it's right along with bringing David back as king. So 2 Samuel 20, verse 1. And there happened to be a man of Belial. So right away we know that he's not a good guy. Belial is another name for Satan. Whose name was Sheba, the son of Bichri, a Benjamite. And he blew a trumpet and said, and this is right after this problem, this argument between Israel and Judah. So he blew a trumpet and said, we have no part in David, neither have we inheritance in the son of Jesse, every man to his tent, so Israel. What he's saying is, okay, he saw an opportunity. He saw the indecision and the contention happening between the 10 tribes and Judah and Benjamin. And he thought, okay, I can be king. I'll be king over Israel. Who cares about David? So every man of Israel went up from after David and followed Sheba, the son of Bichri. But the men of Judah clave to their king from Jordan even to Jerusalem. Well, it makes me appreciate Judah. But it also shows you how fickle people are. Here they were arguing with Judah over who was able to be with David as he was carried back to his throne. And then this one guy says, away with David, and let's come follow me. I'll be your king. And they all drop it and follow him. It's like, what in the world do these guys got for brains? But anyway,
No heart.
yeah. So you know, it's interesting. David couldn't even come back to the throne without a lot of trouble. So verse 3, David came to his house at Jerusalem. And the king took the 10 women, his concubines, whom he had left to keep the house, put them in ward, and fed them, but went not in unto them. So they were shut up unto the day of their death, living in widowhood. I thought this was awful, but that's probably because we're all women, and we can understand. And, you know, he left them. They didn't have a choice. They were left there to keep the house. And they didn't have a choice when Absalom went into them. And now they don't have a choice either. But it is conjectured that partly one reason for David, he took care of them. He just wasn't he wasn't really the husband. I don't know what you call the man in a situation like that. But he didn't have any relations with them. But part of the reason might have been so that if any of them had been pregnant from Absalom, it would be very obvious who was the father. So, and of course, we don't know anything about what happened to them, or if any of them were, or That's the last we hear about them. Then verse 4. Then said the king to Amasa. Now remember, he's David's nephew. He was Absalom's commander-in-chief. Now, David has made him his commander, and it doesn't say that he even talked to Joab about it at all. He just said, okay, you're my commander now. Assemble me the men of Judah within 3 days, and be thou here present. So Amasa went to assemble the men of Judah, but he tarried longer than the set time which he had appointed him. And David said to Abishai, so David is waiting, and Amasa didn't get back in time, and it doesn't seem like David is thinking that Amasa is not for him. He's just for some reason having trouble perhaps getting the support that David was wanting. So David he can't turn to Joab because he just fired him. So he went to Abishai. He needed a general that would be very skillful and do what he needed done. Now shall Sheba the son of Bichri do us more harm than did Absalom. Take thou thy Lord's servants and pursue after him, lest he get him fenced cities and escape us. David didn't want this guy being victorious in what he was doing. And there went out after him Joab's men. So when he said, take thou thy Lord's servants, that seems to indicate Joab's men. So Abishai did what David wanted. He was able to do that. And you can see, because he and Joab were brothers, and they were both generals, and so you can see why the men of Joab would follow Abishai. And there went out after him Joab's men, and the Cherethites and the Pelethites, and all the mighty men. And they went out of Jerusalem to pursue after Sheba, the son of Bichri. When they were at the great stone which is in Gibeon, probably 6 or 7 miles is where Gibeon is, and Amasa went before them. So Amasa was late in coming back, but here he is. So he has come to join them now. And also, in case we thought that perhaps he was being insubordinate to David and, well, going against him, maybe he would have taken Sheba's side, but he's on his way back, and he came back and he joins them. So he wouldn't do that if he was on the wrong side. And Joab, so now we see that Joab was with them. He went out with them. His garment that he had put on was girded unto him, and upon it was a girdle with the sword fastened upon his loins in the sheath thereof. And as he went forth, it fell out. This is a real kind of a confusing portion of Scripture, the way it's described. And Joab said to Amasa, art thou in health, my brother? And Joab took Amasa by the beard with the right hand to kiss him, which was a normal way of greeting someone.
Men kiss men.
Yeah,
Sure.
in those days, that was part of the culture. But it reminds me of Judas coming and giving Jesus a kiss.
But some European people still do that.
Yeah,
It's just a greeting.
yeah. Mm-hmm. And so, but Amasa took no heed to the sword that was in Joab's hand. This was a relative. I think they were cousins. And so he had he probably should have thought twice about it, because he had been the one to be set in place instead of Joab, in Joab's place. But it says, so he smote him therewith in the 5th rib, and shed out his bowels or his intestines to the ground, struck him not again, and he died. So it was with false intent that in other words, he wasn't being his friend at all. Yeah, he was his plan, and he probably had thought about it a little bit. I bet it was premeditated, and he thought, okay, David's demoted me and put Amasa in. First thing I'm going to do when I see Amasa, I'm going to kill him. He did the same thing to Abner because of the same reason. And so we see again how brutal and cold-blooded. He didn't care about anybody.
Would you say how cold-blooded men are, or the people?
Joab,
Just him.
yeah, just
Does
Joab.
it make you wonder that Yeah, I don't know. Where was David's thinking about all? Did he not think that Joab was just gonna go off and, I mean, it happened once before.
Yeah, I don't know.
It just seemed like he should have removed Joab altogether.
Like send him to
Yeah,
another
out
kingdom.
to Turkey or something.
Yeah.
But it just,
Yes,
this was
yes,
a
for the
thing.
murder of,
Right?
yeah.
Yes,
He could have legally, technically, even, under God, had him killed. Maybe he just hadn't had a chance to yet. I don't know.
But he would have known that the other one had been killed. He would have known that.
oh yeah,
This
before
one,
the,
Yeah.
this one.
Yes, David would know. I don't think he would know that Joab intended to kill him, and I wonder if David just thought that all the men, these men were David's army, loyal to David, especially that the group that it calls what were they called?
Philippites and,
Yeah. My paper's together here.
Cherethites and Philippites.
Yeah,
Oh,
Cherethites and
that might have been-
Pelethites. They were exclusively David's men. And the man over them was Benaniah. And it didn't have anything to do with Joab other than being a part of the same general group. But I wonder if David might have thought that they would stop any foul play from Joab. But Joab did it underhandedly. He did it subtly. Nobody knew what he was doing until it was done. So anyway, it's too bad. But in comparison, 2 Samuel 3:27 is where we see that Joab did the same thing to Abner. And when Abner was returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside in the gate to speak with him quietly, and smote him there under the 5th rib that he died, for the blood of Asahel his brother.
And
Well,
where are you?
It's a cross reference. It was very similar, the way he killed Abner, now that he's killing Amasa in the same way. So it didn't matter to Joab. Evidently, Joab's not concerned about God, or he wouldn't have done this. He's not concerned about David. He's not concerned about anything but himself and what he wants. And he's going to be the captain over that army, and nobody's going to stop him. So Joab and Abishai, his brother, pursued after Sheba, the son of Bichri. So he kills this guy. It's like just a second while I kill him, and then he goes on, And so it's crazy, this guy. Yes, very awful. And one of Joab's men stood by him and said, "He that favoreth," so evidently, okay, Amasa everybody knew that he was the commander in chief. So now that, and Joab did this in front of everybody. Evidently he didn't feel like he didn't feel like they would not follow him. His thinking is amazing to me. But so he's got these men standing around, and Joab and his brothers took off to pursue Sheba. Well, these men are maybe they're wondering what to do. And so one of Joab's men stood by him, Amasa is who this is, and said, "He that favoreth Joab and he that is for David, let him go after Joab." So if you're for Joab and David, let's go. Let's get this Sheba. But it says in verse 12, and Amasa wallowed in blood in the midst of the highway. And when the man saw that all the people stood still, in other words, they weren't quite sure what to do. Here's their captain and he's dying. And so this man removed Amasa out of the highway into the field and cast a cloth upon him, when he saw that everyone that came by him stood still. When he was removed out of the highway, all the people went on after Joab to pursue after Sheba, the son of Bichri. It's like a herd of sheep. God is the same. This God we serve is the same as the God they served, and it did not please God for that to happen. It might seem like God is not in the picture, but he is. And Joab does eventually pay for what he's done. verse 14. And he went through all the tribes of Israel to Abel. Sheba is the one we're talking about now. He went through all the tribes of Israel unto Abel and to Beth Makkah and all the Berites. And they were gathered together and went also after him. And they came and besieged, they, being Joab and Abishai, came and besieged him in Abel of Beth Makkah. Now, I wanted to show you this. I meant to copy both of these for you. This is a little smaller, but Jerusalem's down here. Here's where they started. And they went clear up here. See, Mahanaim was right here. He went all the way up here. So it's a long ways. Don't know how many miles, but anyway, from Jerusalem here all the way up here. And so it would take them a week or two to get there at least, probably. And so I can pass that. It's right up here if you want to look at that. So that's where Sheba went, and that is in the territory of the tribe of Naphtali. So I'm not sure why he chose to go up there, but it's not too far from the territory that belongs to Benjamin. So, and he was a Benjamite. Anyway, maybe he felt like he could have a better chance if he got away from Judah and Jerusalem. So let me see where we are. 15. And they came and besieged him in Abel of Beth Makkah. And they cast up a bank against the city, and it stood in the trench. And all the people that were with Joab battered the wall to throw it down. So, cast of a bank, all I can think of is some of the movies I've seen of fighting in the medieval times, because they fought the same way. This city had a wall around it, and so they couldn't just go in. And so they were trying to, some fortifications that they would put against the wall so that they could get up there, and their goal was to knock the wall down so that they could go in and get Sheba. But it's interesting to me that there's no communication that we see of that passes between Joab and Abishai and the army and the people of the city. It's like they just came up there and just started battering it. So we don't know. And I didn't write this verse down, but there is a verse in Deuteronomy that God says, don't just go to a city and destroy it. Ask first if they want to surrender peaceably. And then if they do, they can be your servants, but it saves bloodshed. So that is God says those things. And in reading some of these things, it's almost like they totally just disregarded all the God and all the laws and everything. But God doesn't think that way.
Our precious Lord.
Yes.
Only gives you a chance.
Yes. God is not, he loves everyone, and he's not for all this bloodshed. And that's why I appreciate David not just going back to Jerusalem and using his skilled army to just take it over. That wasn't his spirit. And that's why I read you in Luke where Jesus said, you don't know what spirit you are of. Jesus loved the people in the town that wouldn't receive him.
Yes.
He loved them. And, it gives me hope too, because we know people that we're praying for, and they're not doing things that are right. And the answer isn't to say, God, just get rid of them. That's not the answer.
That's what we do.
Yeah, that's what we do. Okay.
That just proves where Joab's heart was. It wasn't of God, and he just didn't care about anything.
Right.
Let's go do it.
Yeah.
Boom.
He was a military commander. He was good at what he did. He was very skilled, and I think he was interested in glory for himself and interested in just having as much power as possible.
He figured he was getting away with it.
Yeah, he did.
Reckoned God on that one.
Didn't even cross his mind that perhaps God was real and he was in heaven looking at him. Okay, so then verse 16, and I like this. Then cried a wise woman out of the city. Hear, hear, say say I pray you unto Joab, come near hither that I may speak with thee. So she's seeing what's happening, and it calls her a wise woman for a reason. She is a wise woman. This army is outside of her city, getting ready to destroy it. What?
Oh, she said they're banging on the wall.
Yeah, right. And so she says, "Hear, hear." And she said to Joab, "Come near hither." And when he was come near unto her, the woman said, "Art thou Joab?" So we don't know how much they knew about what was going on. I don't know. It seems like they did not know that Sheba and they'd gone into the city, and there was enough of them that probably everyone in the city realized that this guy was here, but perhaps they didn't know what he was there for. It seems that way from what she says. But she knows about Joab, so she said, "Art thou Joab?" And he says, "I am he." Then she said to him, "Hear the words of thine handmaid." And he answered, "I do hear." Then she spake, saying, "They were wont to speak in old times, saying, They shall surely ask counsel at Abel." And so they ended the matter. What she's saying is, this is a city, Abel, where there's wise counsel that can be found. And she was probably one of the reasons there was wise counsel there. And she said, "I am one of them that are peaceable and faithful in Israel. Thou seekest to destroy a city and a mother in Israel. Why wilt thou swallow up the inheritance of the Lord?" And I liked this, how she I think was a godly woman, because she brings it back to God, whom was probably farthest thing from the mind of Joab. In Deuteronomy 4:21, it says, "That good land which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance." The land belonged to God. And it was almost like Israel was occupants of the land, but it was God's land. It was his inheritance that he gave them. In Deuteronomy 15:4, "There shall be no poor among you, for the Lord shall greatly bless thee in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance, an estate or heirloom, to possess it." So that's what God thought of the land, and that's what he thought of the cities. Israel did not own the land, God owned it. And so what she says here, "Why wilt thou swallow up the inheritance of the Lord?" She was correct. She was correct. And so, and Joab wasn't trying to do it in a nice way and save all the lives that he could. He was just going up and just going to get that guy, Sheba. So, and I thought this was great. One of the commentaries I was reading brought out that she's the only person in the entire books of 1st and 2nd Samuel that was willing to confront Joab. Isn't that amazing? And I have to admit, if you knew anything about Joab, which they probably all did, he'd been commander for a long time, she was willing to confront him. And I thought that was pretty cool. I think God gave that power to her. And Joab answered and said, far be it from me that I should swallow up or destroy." Well, I believe that was a lie. "The matter is not so, but a man of Mount Ephraim, Sheba, the son of Bichri by name, hath lifted up his hand against the king, even against David. Deliver him only, and I will depart from the city." And the woman said to Joab, "Behold, his head shall be thrown to thee over the wall." So I guess you didn't cross her.
She had some power.
Yeah, she had some power. Then the woman went to all the people in her wisdom. And it lets us know, first of all, that she's wise, and it brings that out again, so we know that she's doing what God wants her to do. And remember, Sheba was called a man of Belial in the beginning. So, and they cut off the head of Sheba, the son of Bichri, and cast it out to Joab. And he blew a trumpet, and they retired from the city, every man to his tent. What that means is they all scattered. The army, they were through. That's what they needed to do. They needed to get this guy and end his trying to get the throne from David, his plea, and so they they scattered. And Joab returned to Jerusalem unto the king. And that was interesting too. Joab returned to Jerusalem unto David. So, and then the next part, the last part of the chapter, just tells us the administration of David. And the reason it does, we had read about the men who were in David's administration once before, and that was in 2 Samuel 8:15. It gave a list of David's administrative people, and that was after David had victory over Israel's enemies. He went after the Philistines, the Ammonites, the Moabites, labeled all these people, all these battles that David was victorious over these people. And so now he's established enough peace, and he can get on with the business of running his kingdom because he's not out having to fight the enemies. So now it's the foundation for a solid kingdom.
What was that?
2 Samuel 8:15 through 18. And it gives a list. And I'm not going to compare it now because it's pretty much the same group of people. But I'll read it quickly back in our chapter 20. Now Joab was over all the host of Israel, and Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, was over the Cherethites and the Pelethites. They think that perhaps these were some bodyguards or special elite groups. Anyway, so this man, Benaiah, and Joab, they're both listed in the previous list. And Adoram was over the tribute, or the supervisor of the work crews is probably what that was. Adoram is just a side thought on him. When David's grandson Rehoboam is king, and when Jeroboam, there's a division there, and remember the Jeroboam comes to Rehoboam and said, okay, are you gonna continue to tax us all as much as Solomon did, because that was a heavy tax, or are you gonna let up a little bit? Because, saying, if you don't, we're not gonna stay with you. That was the insinuation. Well, so then King Rehoboam sent Adoram, this man, who was over the tribute, and all Israel stoned him with stones. So that was their answer to him. And so he became the first man to fall as a result of the division of the two tribes. And that was not too long after this. So that's a little bit about him. And then verse 24, Jehoshaphat, the son of Elihud, was recorder, which means historian, is what that was. He would write down everything that was going on. And Sheva was scribe, and his name is spelled a little different, but it's conjectured that he's the same one in the first list. And Zadok and Abiathar were the priests. They were the same ones. And then it's real interesting, this one, the next guy, Ira, is an addition. It says, Ira also the Jerite was chief ruler about David. And I looked up the words, and it was David's personal priest, is what he was. Chief...
Mine just says chief assistant to David.
Yeah, one of either chief or ruler meant priest. Mm-hmm. So, and most of the translations translated it as the personal priest of David. So, I'll throw that out there. I don't know for sure since I don't speak Hebrew. So he's not mentioned in the earlier list. So I'm not sure what David had him for, but he's there. So now that David was victorious in regaining his throne, now he can reestablish his kingdom and go about the business of running the country. And so that's why this list is given again. Any questions?
I want to know how Joab explained the murder of Amasa. That he took control of the army.
Yeah, and David, we don't see that David did anything about that.
Yeah. You may.
Yeah, I want to know that too. I have a lot of questions on that. ask when I get to heaven. Although maybe we'll just automatically
We
know.
know somehow that he got what was.
Yeah. He was pretty powerful. In fact, some of the commentaries say that he was probably more powerful than David. Now, David ruled and God backed David up. But Joab was sure powerful.
Two people are richer. Richer.
Karen, do you have a question?
Oh, I do. Let me pass those out. If I can get this thing off.
Maybe, what time did you